Well, next up, I'd like to do a tribute. 1 year ago, actually August 3rd, this week, a year ago, Judy passed away. And to those of us who knew him personally, he was the John Allen of On30. One of the reasons we do remembrances is so that people don't forget about people that have made such a positive contribution to the hobby. So if you will indulge me, and for those of you that don't know him, this will serve as an introduction to one of the greatest model railroaders that I've ever known. Okay, so everybody see that? Yeah. This was Judy, August 3rd, 2024. Last year he passed away, and he was a very dynamic individual. It's a little thing that Ben Poole said last year. Basically, he was a friend to a lot of people and an icon in the model railroading community. He was a gifted artist, a gifted photographer, an outstanding modeler, and he was just a relentless advocate for the hobby. He started out in HO and then gravitated to On30 on the introduction of Bachmann locomotives to the marketplace roughly 20 years ago. He was our leader in our little segment here of On30, a little niche within the hobby. And he's talked about constantly today in our little circle of On30 modelers. He basically was a world-class modeler, and he enjoyed scenery, he claims, best of all, but he was really, in my opinion, nobody did locomotives like him. He kit bashed locomotives like nobody else. And he was a scratch builder as well. He's very fast modeler, do things very quickly, very thoroughly, and just a great modeler. And one thing that he did to promote the hobby is he created these train shows, this On30 narrow gauge, narrow gauge show every June. And for years he had an O scale 2-rail show, which has subsequently been canceled this fall. But as you'll see, the O narrow gauge show will continue. He was a gifted photographer. One of the things that I liked about him and shared with him was the photographer's eye. We've had Mr. Brennan on to talk about how you frame how you do photography on model railroading, how you frame and compose a photograph. This is some of us, I guess it comes natural. It certainly was natural to him. He had a great sense of composition, and we'll see some of his work a little later in the show, later in this program. He was a weathering expert. Like I say, nobody really modeled a locomotive like he did. He was in a league of his own. You could argue a fellow named Alan Littlefield is in the same sphere, but let's just say he was one of the top modelers of kit bashing these locomotives, making them come alive. He had a unique approach to building a layout. He didn't glue anything down. I differed with him on this. His ballast, a lot of his scenery, everything is loose. The advantage to that is if he wants to change a scene, can change it in an afternoon. Claims you didn't have to vacuum anything. He says because nothing was permanent. It's a unique concept. He has furnished layouts for several people, and they seem to to like it. So it is an alternative construction, not for me. And he has numerous published articles. He was over the past 20 years, he's been in model railroader, railroad model craftsman, the On30 annual, Short Line Gazette. I don't know his total number of magazines, but published articles in magazines, but there's a lot. Then of course, he's a great mentor and teacher. We'll get into that a little later. One of the things that I want to characterize him as is the John Allen of On30 and always giving back to the hobby. I featured him in this structure. This is the second floor of a contest winner that I made last year. I featured him next to John Allen. He was alive when I did this. I made this for his 5x5 contest at the Harrisburg show last year. And he was ecstatic that he was in one of my models. I didn't know that 4 weeks later he passed on. Sort of interesting. These are the two shows that he's run them for years. The all Harrisburg all O scale meet, which initially moved from April to September, but has now been canceled. But the Harrisburg narrow O meet continues. We just had it this past June, and it will be run next year as well. He thought this up, and I've attended a lot of railroad shows in my lifetime, starting when I was basically a teenager or younger. And the most unique thing about this Harrisburg Narrow O summer meet is it's more like a family reunion than a train show. It's not cliquish. Everybody seems to encourage talking to complete strangers, inviting them into our little world here. This is really unique in the industry. When I attend a big show, for example, an NMRA show or the Great Train Show in Indianapolis every February, you don't get this feeling of like the gang is here again, like a family reunion. It really is. And he was in his element last June. He didn't know he had stage 4 cancer. These are pictures of him just wandering around, just in his element, happy as a lark, and totally unaware that he wouldn't be with us in 4 weeks. It was an international show last year, and was in part this year. Last year, we had people from 7 different countries, as far away as Australia, Germany, France, England, Canada. That doesn't count. They're like us. That was a little joke. But it was really nice, friendly atmosphere. Wasn't like most shows. And then a unique event is the on-site picnic. This is about a third of the people that attend. There's Al himself right there. So there's a little barbecue going, and it's very casual, very nice show. And then after the show, 2 or 3 of us would go to his home and have little adult beverages afterwards, and just talk about model railroading, look at his railroad, which was exquisite. The red shirts is a little band of brothers that were put together to assist Al with these shows, and they are now perpetuating the legend. They ran this past June Narrow O show, and they plan on having the show next year as well. So his legacy will continue. with the red shirts. Al Judy ran roughly 4 Facebook pages. I am now the administrator of all 4 of his pages. They total 40,000 members now. That onto itself is amazing. This last year, On30 had 7.7 thousand members. We have that up to about 8,200 now. I didn't know until recently Al had the model railroading Facebook page, which covers all gauges. It was basically a ship running without a captain here for the better part of a year. And I asked his wife, Kathy, I said, I didn't realize Al was running the largest and created the largest model railroading Facebook page on the web. And that site has now we have about 30,000 members on there. That's just astounding. That's Al Judy. This was the 2025 show, it was well attended, and it will go on next year, 2026, approximately the same time. I want to talk a little about his workshop. My workshop always looks like a bomb went off in it. I'll clean it up after a project, but it quickly reverts to chaos. His workshop, every time I've been there, this is how he models. He's like the Felix Unger of workshops. Everything is neat, organized, all the way through the process. This was his style. It's not my style, it's his style. I mean, everything I think it comes from, he actually ran a hobby shop. And of course, hobby shop has to be clean, neat, and everything parallel, perpendicular. I don't think that ever lost his direction. That's his layout in the background. All that ballast is loose. All that scenery is loose. All those turnouts, all that track work, nothing's glued down. He got away with it. I mentioned earlier that he had an eye for photography. He would do the sepia photography as well. There's only a couple of us that do this on the On30 railroading page, maybe 3 or 4. It's really a realistic, really a nice look, especially with this world-class modeling that Al Judy did. I mean, doesn't that look like a scene from the past? I mean, modeling doesn't really get any better than that. Some of these are a combination of buildings that he has scratch built or kits that he has built, and sometimes he'll bring somebody else's structure on a layout. And that looks pretty realistic to me. Looks like a scene out of Western Pennsylvania or Eastern Pennsylvania, or West Virginia. Outstanding modeling. This photograph is by Al Judy. Another photo by Al Judy himself. That's loose ballast. It's a kit on the left. I actually know that particular kit. Everything else is scratch built. You'll notice the chains on this locomotive. We had a running joke in our little subsegment of O scale that Al Judy's chains that were draped on his locomotives would sometimes be oversized. So it was a little internal joke, a little ribbing that we'd give him on the chains. Those particular ones look like they're just fine, but now we switch to color. He loved to do scenery. I think that it's just my opinion, but I think he was Mr. Locomotive. Nobody did locomotives or structures like him. This one's purposely blurred to look like an old time 70s color photograph. This is by Judy too. He wasn't afraid to change the color of a locomotive. He had some that were yellow, some that were red, some that were cinnamon colored. Um, this is a sawmill that I popped his face in there. It looks as if you are actually standing in a working sawmill here. This is the quality of modeling did. Um, looks like you could actually run boards through this mill. His latest railroad, last railroad, basically serviced this large lumber facility, this large mill.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
go back about two pictures. I want to interject something here. One more. That locomotive right there was an early On30 made by a guy named Hool, I think. I bought it from that guy. I held it for a long time and ran it on my railroad. And then I traded it to Al. Al was a big trader. He loved to trade for items. And one of the sidelines that he and I had were, I say, Al, I got something I think you'd really like. What do you got to trade? And he'd have a building or something like that, and we would work out equal value. And some of the stuff that you see on the shelves actually came from my layout to him, and some of the buildings on my layout came from him to me. And so that was just a thing that we had going on. It's a kind of personal thing. But that's the way I stayed connected with him. And, I'll always have those memories when I see those buildings. Now, some of the buildings were just little small ones. And, I put on the bottom of them the date that I got it from him. It just happened to do that. And then my name under it. So when I go somewhere, and the buildings will be go to somebody else, they'll know what the history of that building was. But that locomotive, he always wanted to straighten out that cab, and that's the way the original builder built it, and that's the way I got it. So that's just one of the things we would always have in common. We love to trade. Okay.
While we're looking at this photograph, let's just take a moment since we have some time this evening. See how the rails are rusted? The ballast is actually there's large rocks, there's regular ballast. There's two, I know his mix. It's basically two materials plus looks like there's a third in this one, but just there's debris on the side of this hill, trash can, just little things that make it very realistic. See the slight weathering on the cars? Just very well done. It's a, oops, sorry. It's a modeling in subtleties. Again, look at the rusted rail, the weeds, the debris, the it's just, and it's just a nice composition, you know. Oops, sorry, this thing's a little sensitive. There's an up close of a locomotive featuring some chains and a little deck, and how realistic it looks with that ballast. Really looks narrow gauge. And then look in between these railroad ties here. Very nice modeling. This is an Al Judy photograph. Look at the composition here. You move from left to right. It's always one of my favorite photographs here. Look at the detail on the top of those refrigerator cars. There's a lot going on here. Nice composition. So, photo that I took. You know, when we'd have the show, and then in the after hours, after the show, 2 or 3 of us had come by to his home. He'd invite us into his home, and his wife, Kathy, would tolerate us. And first thing I do is run around and take photos of his locomotive structures and things. And then sometimes he'd have a nice little out his backyard. He called it the Shire. He'd set up chairs and we'd have a little bonfire and sit out there and talk about model railroading till 2 in the morning. It was a lot of fun. He was a very dynamic fellow. And the scratch built structure. We set up the scene here. This fellow talking, locomotive coming out of the barn, quote unquote, cracked window here. Nice modeling. This is a kit. Look at all the stuff going on out around it. Can almost sense there's a conversation going on here. This guy carrying this box up here. Look at how that's painted in detail. That's beautiful work. Subtle weathering. Very nice. I always say this photo, it's one of my photos, but it looks like you could actually walk down that track. There's a combination of kits, scratch building. Al used to say he could tell from a photograph whose layout he was looking at. Everybody has a style and a feel to it. Well, Al definitely had a style and feel to his railroad. Just feels like you're in the photograph. You jump into the scene. His modeling was that good. Could almost hear the conversation. And with augmented AI, which we'll get into a little later in the year, can take a photograph like this, put it into AI. These guys will actually start walking around and you can script it. Just a little thing to come here on New Tracks. We're going to fool around with augmented AI a little bit. Add a little dimension to these things. Al acquired this crane because the guy couldn't rig it. So Al acquired it, finished it up, put the rigging on. Being from the mining industry, this is how you block a bucket. You don't put the bucket on the ground, you block it. These steam cranes were 2-man operations. One guy ran the crane, one guy ran the steam engine. Of course, they were replaced probably in the late 1930s, late 30s by diesels. But there was a transition period where a lot of these were still floating around. Nice scene. Now, if anything could define Al Judy, it was doing stuff like this. When we would find a locomotive that just won't run anymore and wasn't worth repairing, what Al would do was he'd make it a derelict here. And he even created a module called the Deadline, which featured about a half a dozen or more of these. But this is a defining scene for Al Judy. He loved doing stuff like this. And I don't think anybody could do it any better than him. Really a neat scene. Look at the rust on the bottom of that locomotive, and in here, right where the rust would be down low. And then board holding the tarps on. The tarps are all tore up. It's just very nice scene. I was told by somebody that Al actually didn't. This was not Al's. He purchased this and integrated it into his layout. Nevertheless, it's very unique modeling here. Iron grate in the water, sluice, seldom modeled. I just thought it was a very neat photograph. This was the very last scene that Al Judy made on his railroad before passing. He said that he was going to redo his whole layout, one section at a time. And he was switching to Pico On30 track. He had used HO track on his layout for years and years. And then he was making the switch to Pico, which you can see here. This is a lumber mill camp. Some of his scenery work here. He said he liked scenery best of all. This is pretty high level scenery here. And these are all scratch built buildings, and a lot going on here. I think we owe it to ourselves to remember those guys that have made a significant contribution to the hobby. The John Allens of the world, the Alan McClellans. I mean, we can go on and on and on. And Al Judy's in the same breath as these guys. One thing that we didn't talk about is we hit on a little bit of his ability to mentor people. He would answer, this came to light after his passing. He would text not 10 or 20 people a day, but in the hundreds. It was just crazy, his reach. He would take anybody's call, anybody's text, and he'd respond same day, same time. I remember I had a locomotive that was literally hopping down the track. I gave him a call and he picked up. I said, Al, I've got this mogul that's literally hopping down the track. What's going on there? He said, well, you got a cracked gear. All right. So I took it apart. Sure enough, there was that cracked gear. I did a scene called McCoy's Camp, where I have an abandoned boxcar. And I texted him. I said, are these things made of, before I built the scratch build, I said, what do you make what are these box cars made out of? They make 1x6s, 2x6s, 1x8s, 2x8s. He told me, well, most of them are 1x8s or 1x6s. But the point is that he took my call or answered my text. He did this not with me, but hundreds of people. And I used to say his reach on Facebook was 20,000. It was actually 40,000. Imagine that. We get excited on new tracks and we get 300 to 500 people look at a segment. He was basically, with his programs, reaching 40,000 model railroaders. That's a hell of an impact on the hobby. And that isn't strictly ON3 or ON30. That he formed the model railroading Facebook page. It's the largest model railroading Facebook page in Facebook and has 30,000 subscribers, members. That's simply amazing. So